Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Sylvie Légère. I am the co-founder of the Policy Circle, and it's a pleasure to have you here. We have with us Denisha Merriweather, and before we start the program, I'd like to introduce Judy Willard. Judy. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Great. We will be, I wanted to kind of lay out first the program, how we will be organizing this event. We'll spend about like 10 minutes in a discussion with Denisha Merriweather, who I will introduce very soon. And then we will open everyone's microphone and we will be able to engage in a roundtable discussion with Denisha. And we will conclude our program around 7:50, 7:55. So we are very excited to provide you with this experience today. As we facilitate, I'll be the facilitator, and as I introduce Judy Willard, will also be one of the facilitator of today. I'd just like to remind everyone that we are recording this. We want to make this program available to others, to other members of the Policy Circle, and also this is a kickoff and a way to encourage and inspire all of the Policy Circle members to really host this type of discussions in their own communities and with their circles. So thank you so much. So Denisha, welcome to the Policy Circle event. Denisha Merriweather is the Director of Family Engagement at the American Federation for Children. AFC, some of you don't know, is the largest school choice advocacy group in America and is really dedicated to empower families, especially lower income families, with the freedom to choose the best K-12 education for their children. Denisha previously served as school choice youth liaison at the Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education. But really, why we're so thrilled to have Denisha with us today is that Denisha is a Florida tax credit scholarship graduate. So she is really a poster child of the miracles and great things that can happen when someone is fully empowered to control type of education that is appropriate for them. So she received a master's degree in social work from the University of South Florida and a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary social science. Denisha, you've worked with the Duval County Public School as a teacher's assistant for children with special needs. You were also an after-school instructor. You played many roles in education, and you've really become a national symbol for parents' choice in education. You headlined for several governors, and you were featured in the Wall Street Journal, in the news. So welcome, and it's really great to have you here. And I would love to hear from you. As everybody knows, education is at the center of everyone's discussion. Parents more than ever are actually paying attention and want to really be in control of what education is most appropriate for their kids. So Denisha, what is the end game, the purpose here that we are working towards in education?
Well, thank you so much, Sylvie, for having me, and to all the lovely ladies at the Policy Circle. Thanks for having me and being so welcoming. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. The problem at hand is, it's very appropriate right now, like you said, Sylvie, to talk about education, because that's probably one of the largest systems that has not fully recuperated in our society right now due to COVID-19. And in my opinion, that just speaks to that we have a long-standing problem within the K-12 education system. And the bureaucracy that we have is not that conducive to providing an equitable and a great education for every kid in America. And so that brings us to the conversation that we have today with Education Savings Account, and talking about that great innovation within the education space that's in some states, and hopefully they'll spread across other states. And so it's great that you guys are starting the conversation and will continue it in your intimate circles in your various states. And so, yeah, education savings accounts. We have one of the biggest programs in Florida. And like Sylvie said, I participated in the tax credit scholarship in Florida. And that changed my life. I have a unique perspective within the education space because I'm a beneficiary of a scholarship program that literally did change my life. I failed the third grade twice, and I was literally going to be like my mother, my brothers, and my uncles and drop out of school. And it wasn't until I started to go to a small private school on a scholarship that my life changed for the better. When I realized the difference maker that was, I began to speak out. I began to share my story and to tell other people that this opportunity to just be able to switch schools made all the difference in my life, and how much more of a difference could it make if every student in America had that same opportunity. And that literally has, it gives me so much passion to do this work, because every student in America does deserve the right to a great education of their parents' choice. And ESAs are that great customizing tool. And we'll go a little deeper, but thanks again, Sylvie, for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And there's right now being discussed, and there was the School Choice Now Act was part of a recent coronavirus relief package that was sponsored and submitted by Senator Tim Scott. And this is an attempt for the federal government to also enable, provide some tax relief, some relief for people who need additional resources for education. Can you talk a little bit about that, perhaps, and how it ties into ESAs? It's at a federal level, but still be great for everyone to hear about it.
Yes. So the School Choice Now Act is a new iteration of the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And so this proposal that was proposed by Senator Tim Scott, he's also the author of Opportunity Zones. And so this legislation will enable scholarship granting organizations, which could be designated by the state, by the governor, as any nonprofit. So not just organizations that are private schools, that are serving private schools. Any nonprofit could be designated as a scholarship granting organization and give federal funds directly from the federal government to parents in order to use how they see fit for their child's education. It's transformative, and it's such an amazing thing. And some of the things that the ESA, it's kind of like an ESA at the federal level, but really it's a tax credit. It's a federal tax credit where everyone would be able to designate some of their tax funds to get a tax credit. And those funds would be designated to an SGO, but it would operate like an education savings account. And parents could use those funds to purchase laptops, to buy curriculum. I'm sure you guys have all heard of pod schools and micro schools during this time. And so parents could use those funds to pay tuition or pay a tutor for those micro schools, or purchase curriculum. In Florida, we have a special needs scholarship program, and most of them are for special needs students. And so you can purchase therapies, horseback riding, and things like that for your child. The possibilities are really limitless, and as more innovations become possible within the education space, like micro schools, everybody's now like, what is a micro school? We're trying to wrap our head around it. Education savings account could fund all of the new innovations that are taking place within the education space. So that's why they are really the pinnacle, they're the gold standard, because they really do help us to unbundle some of the education services that we have had for so long, to make more things possible.
So great. And maybe just before we will be ready to go into breakouts. So I think we have about like 20 participants. So what we're going to do is divide up into two breakouts. And I will be leading one discussion and Judy will be leading the other discussion. Denisha will be spending her time with the splitting her time between the two breakouts. So I think we'll be able to go deeper and hopefully everyone had a chance to review the brief on education saving accounts that provides an overview of what's going on in each of the states because it's really specific to some states. It's not all the states, but this is a way to inform you and perhaps something you can engage on with your representative in your states and also discuss with your senator in Congress, your senator, to further discuss your interest in this. So we'll be splitting up into two rooms, and so my team, so Judy and Nicole, you will be directing everyone.
Conversation for the policy circle because I work for a nonprofit called the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri. And we work here in Missouri to create more education options for families so they can find the best fit school for their kids. We work on all types of school choice, from private school choice to charter choice to homeschooling to whatever works for families. We understand that all kids learn differently and have different needs. But we have been working specifically for the past few years on ESAs, or here they're called empowerment scholarship accounts. We've worked on multiple different pieces of legislation over the past few years and would love to see any form of that get passed, even if it's a small bill that maybe only benefits a few families. Yeah, and then especially I feel like right now in the time of COVID, parents are just really much more aware of the need for school choice. And I'm hearing a lot from particularly public school families that they're very frustrated that their schools are not open and that they wish they could take the tax dollars that are going to their public schools where they're not getting currently educated and be able to take that money to a private school. So I just feel like now, the time is really ripe to engage more folks in this work. So.
Yeah, Denisha, maybe you could talk just to hear your perspective on advocacy and how you were able to see some of the changes made. Maybe you could share, like you're leading family engagement. So maybe you could talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, and Cece, it's good to see you. You're doing some amazing work. We've collaborated on a lot of, especially the Miss Virginia screenings. And so great work. Cece has some really great resources at SEAM, also about advocacy, but at the national level at AFC, yeah, we do three major things at the American Federation for Children. We lobby, make sure that once the bill gets in the coffers, that we are making sure we support it and get as many votes as we can on it. And we also have a PAC where very much trying to get those people into office who support school choice legislation. And then the third is advocacy, training up advocates, people who've benefited from school choice, like myself, and others, to promote school choice in events like this, to just spread the word as far and wide as we can. One of the major things that we are so happy about is that we have a fellowship program of students who've benefited from school choice. And these students are from charter to homeschool to scholarships across the country. And they're in college and they participate in this fellowship to learn about the policy and the communications and everything that's needed to make an effective change at the legislative level. And then we hope that they will continue to go out and get jobs and have these, conversations within the education space. I do the same thing with parents. So talking with and making sure that parents understand about school choice and the policies that are proposed. And so really when talking about advocacy, I think I was telling Sylvia, maybe it was someone else, the hardest conversations about school choice happen at the dinner table or with friends. Not necessarily with, you think you walk into a governor's office or your congressman's office or your state senator. It's literally the friends and family who've heard these crazy things in the media about school choice, and it's convincing them that it's really going to be beneficial, not only for some imaginary kids that you can't see, but for their kids as well. But I think COVID-19, unfortunately, really was a silver lining, because all families across the country were beginning to see, wait a minute, they were engaged, in the education space, and they saw that there were some things that they didn't control, and they wanted to control it for their kids. They wanted to own the education funds for their child so that they can make sure their kids were getting a good education, but they couldn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jamie, you have the floor.
Thank you for being here. I have 4 children, and our oldest went through public school through her freshman year, and then we had decided that it would have been beneficial for her to not stay in that school, just some social issues going on. And so we ran into the issue. I live in Indiana, and we do have some sort of, freedom of choice, but the problem is the school districts in our area, they were closed. So it was like, if the school district will receive your child, yes, you can transfer. But so we went the private school route with our oldest, and then the dollars did not transfer to that. So I think, but my younger 3 are still in public school. But when I talk to school board members and things like that about it, the issue that they throw up, I'm very pro school choice. I think, parents know what's best for their children, and they should be the ones that are advocating as much as possible what's best for their own person and their own children. But the school board, like some of them, their response was, we'll have to fire teachers, or we won't have a good budget. We run these schools, we have this ideal budget, and if we have kids transient, which I don't necessarily think that would translate that way, but that is like some of the rebuttal that I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, Denisha, do you have like a response? What is your response or experience there, to those types of arguments?
Yeah, I mean, I got my master's in social work, how you guys heard and my belief is that no kid should experience trauma in school. And for kids who are in environments that don't work for them, it's traumatic. We mandate that kids go to school in this country, so kids should be in an environment that's conducive for learning. And when they're not, we have a serious problem. And like, for people who can afford it, they can get up and move. For people who can afford to say, this school isn't working for me, and I'm sorry that happened with you and your daughter, they can afford. And then for those that can't, they just stuck with trauma. And I think that's such a, I don't use that term loosely. It is
argument, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can't leave a child traumatic. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
a really great.
And I think if we, I remember I have my favorite teacher story. I have the teacher I hated story. And I think we carry those stories with us for the rest of our life. And kids should not be carrying the stories of, oh, I hated school. Like that's not right. That's not good.
I'd like to invite Lakeisha to maybe say a few words. Lakeisha, it's great to see you. You want to unmute yourself?
Hey, Sylvie. Hi, everybody. Hi. So I must admit that I did not read the brief. I am here catching up. I am in the middle of a master's program that is very, very demanding and working full time. But what I can say as a mother of a now 16-year-old and a 21-year-old, my children, we live in the state of Illinois. My children were enrolled in private school in their primary years. And the reason why I was able to afford that is because I worked for the school as an administrator. As soon as I moved on in my career path and I took my children out of private school and put them into a public school system, I was miserable and my children were also miserable. And so in a very high level, school choice is a very, very important thing. Every child has diverse needs, and every school cannot speak to every child's needs. And so I think it's important for parents to be able to make those choices. So, Sylvie, maybe you can let me know if I just read this correctly, but I just read something that talked about the 2020 budget for the state of Illinois, and I know you live in Illinois, that school choice programs were being cut in the first round of talks for the budget.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do we help policymakers who are crafting the legislation understand how important these programs are for our children?
Yeah. Denisha, do you want to answer that about how, what have you found is the most effective way to talk to our legislators? Because I think it would be, you have to go to your state senator and your state representative and state senator to really get them to understand what's at stake, right?
Yeah. And Cece does this work too, but literally it's taking a bus of parents, students, people who are beneficiaries or who could benefit from these type of policies down to the state house and in the politician space, letting them know, one, these are your constituents, because 9 times out of 10 it's the folks who don't support school choice, and they have 90% of the population who would benefit from these type of programs, and they don't support the policies. And then something that we've started to do, which is new to the to AFC, and because we're so nice, but it's actually like really kind of being nasty and telling them like it is, like you don't support these policies when your constituents benefit from these programs, because this country belongs to the people. I don't want to sound, but we have to really let it be known that we want these programs. And but the most effective is parents and students, and then next I would say through the media, through communications, marketing, and door hangers, whatever is possible and necessary to get them to support these.
Yeah, and in Illinois, I think in every state there is a group that is advocating, and thanks to the work of AFC actually to really mobilize this. And in Illinois, it's Empower Illinois is kind of the group who's really doing a lot of advocacy work. So Lakeisha, that would be, one group to connect with to really participate in their efforts. So Tammy Olivas, great to see you. Would you like to share a few words? And then Jasmine, so yeah. Or Jet, do you want to unmute, or I'll ask Jasmine, do you want to go?
There we go. Sorry, the unmute button wasn't working.
Uh-oh.
Hi, Denisha, thank you so much. My girls are in college now, and I could have really used the ESAs when they were younger because they're two very different personalities, and the school that they went to is a public school that is just huge, and both of them could have used much smaller schools. And I wish our taxpayer money had followed us. But now that they are in college, I'm coming at it from the perspective of, I was helping a woman who's running for Congress here in Illinois yesterday make phone calls to constituents. And one of the things that I found along with these profiles is a lot of people say they are against school choice, and I don't quite understand that. I think, so I was really keen on your advocacy and marketing of it. And I think social media and creating these really effective and sort of just catchy memes would be really important, as well as going to the legislators. But I think a lot of the informing parents and the community writ large, not even people with kids, is so important. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, or anybody, maybe Cece, I was really encouraged by the work that you guys are doing because I want to be able to translate this to, I have a niece in Tennessee. She has 2 little kids that are in Knoxville that are growing up, and I'd like to be able to say, hey, you know, here's a resource. So advocacy.
Yeah, so maybe, you know, Denisha, you'll be moving to shortly to the next breakout room. So perhaps you could share a little bit of what's the most effective way of communicating, because it's true that people, you know, don't always have all the information.
Well, I think, yeah, what you said in the chat box and what you said is, yeah, right on. I recently just created a TikTok account for work purposes to try to get information out through TikTok. So by any means necessary, I think that, I mean, the school choice, the teachers unions get money funneled in directly from the state coffers. You know, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling, teachers have to opt in to give funding, their money to the teachers union. But before, they were just getting money in. I say that because they just have bukus of money to pay for marketing, to pay for communications. And we're honest. And so we actually do have donor intent and all this stuff within the school choice space. So, but by any means necessary, I think through memes, through TikTok, through, through any other. I also, which my brother, I have a teenage brother, he doesn't really like that I do this, but Twitch is like a gaming video thing. And so I put content on Twitch too. And so that's not what it's meant for, but who cares? I'm trying to get the message out about school choice. And I think when people start to understand more about it, they'll support it. And also you said that in communications with people don't support it. We have studies after studies that show that people do support school choice. We have 70% of the population who say they support school choice. And during the time of COVID-19, those numbers actually spiked. So I can share that study with you guys. There are actually more people who support school choice than we think.
Well, you'll have to share your TikTok account there in the chat when we regroup. It would be great, as well as your Twitch account, so some of us can follow. So thank you for being part of our room. I think you'll be you will be transported to the next room here very shortly. So so great.
Yep, I agree. Denisha, we are just starting with our first official question of our discussion guide, and it is, what is the priority? Wait, let me just double check what is the priority in regards to a child's education? And Tiffany was saying that it is the great equalizer. So fill us in, what is your response to that question?
I think that's a great question. And Corinne, you did such an amazing job with this policy brief. I learned something, and I'm supposed to be the expert in this, and so thank you so much. You know, I say that's a good question because literally I worked at the federal level, and the answer to that question was still trying to be figured out. Like, what is the purpose of K through 12 education? Some people say it's workforce. I would say I lean more towards that, you know, that we are trying to develop people after they graduate from high school, can go out and give back to society by paying taxes. So, and working, and being consumers. So I lean more towards that. And so however we can develop an educated workforce, unfortunately, we don't always teach kids in the K through 12 system skills that will get them into a job. And so we have, I guess like me when I went to college, a career college student, changed my major like 50 times until I found the right fit. But for me, I think that's the purpose of K through 12, to make sure that kids graduate from high school, from school, with the skills that they need to be productive. And the secretary, she likes to do the 3 C's. So communication, collaboration, and I forget the other C, but it's another C, and it sounds really cool. But Yeah, I'll think when I remember it, I'll let you know. But yeah.
Does anybody here raise your hand if you have a specific question for Denisha? Gonna watch? Anybody? While we've got her in the room, otherwise we're just gonna keep going with our questions. So nobody, want to do that? All right,
Just a quick
Consuelo.
question.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just
Yep.
a quick question because it was very inspiring what you were sharing in the beginning. But I don't know if I understood correctly. Like, did you say something that in third grade, you didn't pass once or twice or something, and then it was until you were given the opportunity to move to a private school that you were able to really kind of, you know, move on and do better, right? So could you tell, because that's very important about the education part, right? Like what things were missing before and then were given after that, you know, now you are who you are, right? Thanks to that kind of huge opportunity that you were given in that moment.
Yeah.
So what was before and what was that aha big thing that you got from the private education that that at that young age you kind of can point it out and share a little bit with us?
Yeah. I was telling the other group too, I got my master's in social work. And so I learned through study, like trauma is really terrible. I guess I just put it in layman's terms. Nobody should experience trauma. And unfortunately, I experienced a lot of trauma, and kids every day experience trauma in school, and that's not right. And so one on the small scale, which is actually monumental, the teachers actually liked me, like at the private school. The teachers actually cared about me. I would walk into a classroom and the teachers would sigh when I went to my local public school. They would sigh as I walked through the door. And I internalized that. I knew that it was because I'm not sure, like my mother was in the class, my uncles and some of my other family members went to the same school. And so I just said, okay, well, this is not a place for me. I was not on grade level. And so I failed the third grade twice. And when I would read out loud, instead of helping me or taking me aside to do extra tutoring or learning opportunities, the teachers would just like, somebody else read, you know. But and now I'm comparing and contrasting because it was literally drastically different. At the private school, I wouldn't even raise my hand because I knew I wasn't that great of a reader. Teachers would automatically call on me and just let me sit through my stumbling. I would literally read through sentences, paragraphs, stumbling, crying, like, please just go to someone else. And that was not the case. They stayed with me. Before I started at the school, I met with a teacher one-on-one for tutoring. And so it was literally investment, I say. The teachers were invested in my life. And they were the ones that helped me to apply for college. I was the first in my family to go to college, so I didn't know that I was supposed to, in 12th grade study hall, be applying for colleges during study hall. And one day someone came up to me and was like, Denisha, okay, what schools have you applied to? I was like, you know, what are you talking about? Like, you haven't started applying for schools? I was like, no, I didn't think I was supposed to be doing that. It's those type of things. If I had gone to a public school, I don't think that would have been the case. I went to, and it wasn't like I went to undergrad on a full ride scholarship, but I just didn't know. And so I think that, yeah, it was just drastically different.
You know, it's interesting because when I asked you what is the priority in regards to a child's education, you just gave the answer. It's investing in their spirit, in their soul, in their life. That's the priority in the child's education. Yeah. You know, because if you invest in that, they will ultimately become good, productive citizens in this world. Carla, do you have something to say about the priority in regards to the child's education in that question?
I think that's a good segue because when our children were young, they were in a Montessori school, which very much embraces the concept of being part of a community, being educated, and really finding what it is you're supposed to be doing and pursuing your life's passion. I know when we've looked at other educational models like Acton Academy, there's this idea of, you know, finding what your passion is to pursue, but also being able to make a living at it and being a contributing member to your community and to society. And I think that that's what I can continue to go back to even for my own children. Like, that's my greatest wish for them, is to find what it is their passion that they can earn a living at, and that is you know, beneficial, where they have their role within the community. And so I think it really is fostering the spirit and self-awareness, and as well as the, you know, the rote facts and things like that. But I think it's, you know, right now, in some ways, that's a disconnect within the educational system. And, you know, I think that when there's a lot of discussion of trades and things, I always think back to the Montessori, where if you had decided to go to a trade school, that would not have been something that would have been looked down upon, because you need all of those trades. But I know from my own personal experience, my brother is a really good woodworker, but because of where we grew up, the idea of going into a trade was really, you wouldn't go to a trade school out of high school. You had to go to college. And so I think a lot about that, because as far as fulfillment of the individual and finding what your life's passion is, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. It's hard, but so I think that that's what I go back to now that I have children, like what you want for them and what you want for other children, that, you know, so.
Yeah, I agree. We're getting deep now. I'm gonna start to cry. But it is true. I mean, it is. You want your kids to find something that they are passionate about, and that will give back to society. So, Lindsay, give us your perspective.
Yeah, you know, I noticed the last sentence of the conclusion of the brief: preparing children to be productive members of society begins with education. And I think it just, right on the heels of what Denisha and Carla both said, you know, 4 kids, the youngest is 11, and you know, Amazon, they're throwing out like all these sponsored posts, and there was this life journal, and it piqued my interest, and so I purchased it on Amazon, and it has been amazing. So that's part of his like after school routine, and it is literally teaching them a growth mindset. So it's a workbook that he has to work through, and it's just quotes and reflection. You know, okay, if you were in this situation, what would you do? But it's just teaching their minds of how to work through, push through, and it's just a growth mindset. So I feel, you know, basic reading, basic math, but the education piece of just preparing them for to be productive citizens just through hard work is priority.
Lindsay, I like
We just got, yeah.
Oh, I really like that. And I want to tie your piece into the ESA conversation, because with education freedom accounts, education scholarships, sorry, that was the original proposal, education savings accounts, your purchase of the life journal on Amazon could have been counted as an education expense and not an out-of-pocket expense. And so things like that, and you as a parent saying, I want my child to learn how to be introspective and to be mindful of, and that's a part of their schooling curriculum, that would have been education related. And that's why I think this piece of legislation and this type of education innovation is so important, because it really does put the power back in the parent's hand to say, what do I want my kid to learn and get out of life? And yeah, that's great. I just wanted to put that out.
Thank you. Thanks, Denisha, for adding that. And I got the 5-minute warning, I think, like 2 minutes ago. So, Amanda, can you talk quick?
I can, if Lindsay turns us out. So I feel like I've been a little spoiled because my son, I think, goes to one of the best public school districts in Indiana. I mean, it's just phenomenal what they do. And so it makes me just question how a border between my district and the next district can be so different. And what these ESA savings accounts can do for that choice and for that competition and making them work, in competition with each other, because they, he struggled with school his entire school career. I mean, he's needed these individual development plans. He's had counseling. I mean, there's just been an ongoing issues with him, but they have never given up. They just have never given up on him and teaching him those life skills and really pouring into him. And now he's a junior, and I got to tell you, this is his best year ever. And there's some teachers there that he just connects with. And so sometimes they get it right. Sometimes public school gets it right. That's experience though.
Yeah, and this is not a us versus them. It's a what's best for the kid. And if a particular setting is great for one kid, that kid should be able to go to that learning environment no matter what. Like, nothing should keep them from being in that place. And the big thing that keeps kids from being out of places that work for them is money. And so with education savings accounts, as it relates to school districts, in utopia, if everyone, like Nevada, they would have had a universal education ESA. The district school, your neighborhood school, would count as tuition. And so that would be shaved off, and you would be left with the remaining ESA dollars to use however you see fit. Just like how it is now used for private schools. So if a student says they want to go to a private school, they use their portion of their ESA, however much it costs to pay tuition, let's say $8,000, and they get an ESA for 10. So they have $2,000 for the rest of that school year to use on other education expenses. If a state had a universal education scholarship account where every student, no matter if they're going to a district, private, charter, whatever, it would act the same way.
I love the idea that it's all of our tax money, right? I mean, we all put into the system, so we should be able to use that money that benefits our children the best. Like, that just makes common sense to me, but it's government, so sometimes common sense doesn't always work. So I did get the 2-minute warning, like 10 seconds into you talking, maybe, Denisha, so I can...
Well, welcome back, everyone. This worked remarkably smoothly. So thank you. Big applaud to Molly Irvin, our web producer here, because this worked really well. So thank you so much. I hope we got a lot of our conversation. Denisha, I'd like to invite you to maybe say a few closing words, in terms of what you heard from people in those in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, this was really awesome. I've been feeding my dog chicken, and I ran out of chicken, so he's now kind of grumpy. So please excuse him. But this is just so awesome. And everyone is just so amazing, like really awesome. And I definitely continue, from my understanding, you guys are going to use this information, use the ESA brief to have some smaller policy circle conversations in your own communities. And that's what it's all about. And so I definitely rely on me as a resource. In the second panel and the second breakout, I went in more deeper dive into my story. And one of the interesting things that we talked about in the second breakout is the purpose of education. And we kind of came to a consensus that the purpose of education is to make sure that the kids are being invested into, and that they're really having a good experience and being community members. They're learning how to be a part of a community and then a part of our nation as a whole to contribute in productive ways. And that was a good ending point. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you again for participating. We, in our group, we talked about the importance of actually building coalitions and in order to advocate for school choice opportunities in our states. We had representation from various states, so we shared a lot of resources. So thank you again. And I would like to kind of, I'd like to thank everyone for participating to this program, and we want to hear your feedback about, you know, what you thought. So if you want to put in the chat some thoughts about what we could do differently or better next time, we're always striving to improve. And I want to invite you to join our next virtual program, which is going to be next week, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And it will be on socialism in America. And we have really two exceptional guests to discuss. This will be more of a webinar format, and we will be publishing a brand new brief on socialism. So as a parting point, I'd love to invite you to host a circle conversation or even within your community on education savings accounts and school choice, parental choice, and also to plan on being very engaged the rest of the year as we are approaching the election. So thank you so much. So thank you for joining.